G'day and welcome to Doesn't Matter. Anger. It's a funny one. From what I've seen and from what I've read in the literature, anger's most commonly managed a couple of different ways. Probably the most common one is it's suppressed. Children are shamed for their anger when they express anger. They are immediately invalidated, immediately crushed, even physically in some cases, particularly if you came from more traditional homes. Anger usually results in anger. You're going to get a whooping if you don't cut that out straight away. So what happens is that when children express anger, when they're crushed, when they're suppressed, when they're shamed and told that's disgusting behaviour, Johnny or Lisa, why are you doing this? They're not taught to explore their own feelings. They're not taught to explore the mechanics of their own mind. What they're taught is that the feeling that they have is an invader, and the only way that it can be dealt with is to be crushed by an external force, their parents, authority. You have the complete emasculation of the child. You've now made them completely vulnerable to their own anger, helpless in the face of their anger. And as they grow, that will only become more and more pronounced. Now, that can also work the other way, which is less common, but becoming more and more common nowadays, which is the hedonistic indulgence of the anger phase, where parents do the right thing to begin with in going, oh, you're having a feeling. That's okay. You're allowed to get angry. Everyone gets angry. And they're supported through that. Now, there's a secondary part of that phase, and it needs to come in at some point, usually as quickly as possible, where the child is encouraged to begin to detach from the anger, to allow it to be, but to separate themselves from the anger, to no longer see the anger or the experience of hurt as them, but something that happened, something they can examine, something they can learn from. Children very young can begin to learn that. You know, they can be veritable gurus by the time they're growing if we're able to inculcate them with that balance. But so hedonistically indulging children's anger, attachment parenting tends to encourage that to a large degree. It just leads to the same issues as the suppressive parenting. Suppressing anger or overly indulging anger leads to the same place. Nothing good. People who can't manage their own emotions, who cannot regulate their anger and can't regulate all the associated emotions that come with it. Because our anger ties into fear. It's often triggered by fear, but it ties into our feelings of love, self-worth, our connection to other people, our attachment style. It ties into all those things inextricably. So if you can't manage fear and you can't manage anger, you can't manage these primal emotions because they were either suppressed or overly indulged, which I think is becoming more of a problem nowadays, then you're going to have a very, very difficult life. Much, much more troublesome than it needs to be. The linking caveat, the transitionary phase, is the ability to sit with the emotion, breathe, relax the muscles, go and kick some stones if you have to vent physically. Do it in a non-violent or at least non-destructive way that doesn't spill over onto other people as best as possible. Try to show them ways of expressing their anger that aren't going to be antisocial, that are going to be useful to them and not pernicious or destructive to others. Help them find ways of stepping back from the anger and examining where it came from and why. And that will also help them step back from the hurt and the fear that triggered it, and giving them life skills to be able to manage themselves, to be self-regulating entities rather than the dysregulated adults that we largely have today. I don't know many people who grew up regulated. Some Yes, a few, a percentage. I'm not sure what the percentage will be. I would say as little as 10%. It could be more. I could be cynical about that, but I suspect it's probably 10% or less. But most people grew up pretty dysregulated. And if they were very intelligent or had, some level of acute insight, they were able to find their way to some level of regulation. But for most of us, it's a long and tragedy-laden path. Don't crush your kids' anger. Don't crush your own anger. Don't indulge it either. The balance is in the middle, okay? It's just a feeling. It's an important feeling. It's telling you something. Fear, pain, anger, they're all indicators of something. Pay attention. Pay attention to them. But they're not you. The feeling isn't you. And teaching children to not associate with their feelings is a really good thing. Teaching them to take notice and pay attention to their feelings is also a really good thing. Those might sound paradoxical in contradiction, but they're not. It's the yin-yang principle. I must acknowledge my feelings. I must express my feelings in ways that are non-destructive, that are useful, or at least not harmful to others. I must find useful and coherent ways of expressing and managing my emotions, and I can only do that through detachment. I cannot do that if I remain buried in and deeply associated with the emotion. At some point, I have to step back and out of that emotion. Otherwise, you end up with alien body syndrome, CPTSD, and all those horrible nasties that are waiting in the human psyche to railroad you and take you over. You're not free anymore. You have the illusion of freedom. We don't want that. No one wants that. No one needs that. Society certainly doesn't need it. So, understanding that you're not your emotions starts as a young baby, starts as children. It starts there. Please, don't suppress your children's anger. Don't overindulge it. Help them to manage it. And probably some of us should start helping to manage our own angers better than we do. Okay? Oos.